Hello and welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. I am so thrilled to introduce our next guest to you today. And let me just say, what a delight she is. Her name is Corinne Zupko, LPC. She's a licensed professional counselor. Is that correct?
Uh-huh.
And she's the author of the best-selling book, From Anxiety to Love, a radical new approach for letting go of fear and finding lasting peace. It was released in 2018. She began her work with A Course in Miracles and mindfulness meditation after struggling with debilitating anxiety and panic attacks, and now lives anxiety-free. Corinne is a keynote speaker, adjunct professor of counselor education at the College of New Jersey, and a licensed counselor. She's also a board-certified coach and teaches weekly mindfulness meditation classes at a major U.S. financial institution. I'd like to introduce and welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Corinne Zupko.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, Corinne, I want to talk to you about so many things, but how can we keep it down to a couple of topics? Really, I want to talk about how to simply let go of fear and anxiety. Can we start maybe and talk about what does anxiety look and feel like to you?
So we can think about anxiety as being on a continuum. And at the low end of the continuum, I think we all experience some degree of anxiety. It might show up in your shaky foot. You know, if you're trying to sit still and your foot just has to shake because you really don't want to be sitting still. That might be anxiety on the low end. We might feel just a little bit of unease, discomfort, it just not feeling quite settled.
Mm-hmm.
On the high end of the continuum are where we see panic attacks, are where we see debilitating anxiety, overwhelming fear. Our heart might race and skip a beat. We might feel that trembling, that sweatiness, and that might come and go in waves. So anxiety is really on a continuum of what we might see, you know, on a day-to-day basis to a much more extreme presentation, which is where I lived most of my life, was on the high end of that continuum.
So let's back up a few steps then. I mean, obviously you've written this amazing book that is released now, but what started? How? I mean, I was reading your book. You had gotten your first anxiety diagnosis at age 2?
Yeah. I was diagnosed with separation anxiety disorder back then.
Wow.
My poor mother could not walk out of the room without me screaming my head off.
Wow.
And so I was an anxious child. I remember having all sorts of phobias and bizarre fears. And we had tried counseling for me as a child, and it only helped a little. It was when I got to college that things started really hitting the fan, because I started having panic attacks, all-out panic attacks, because a student who I didn't even know died very suddenly of meningitis. So he was supposedly at a party the night before and dead the next morning, and it freaked me out.
And how old were you?
I was 19. I was 19.
Wow.
So that was, after I learned about that, I woke up at 3 a.m. the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
Overwhelming fear, convinced I was about to die. My heart was racing. I didn't know what was happening. It was really, really scary. And I called my mom at 3 a.m. and magically she picked up the phone that night, and we figured out that I was having a panic attack, and she helped me calm down as much as I could. And I'd struggle then for years with out of the blue panic attacks. They would come and go, sometimes be triggered, sometimes not, sometimes wake me up in the middle of the night, sometimes just happen during the day. So I lived that way for a long time. It was not fun.
Yeah. And, I imagine there are some listeners out there that are just nodding their head. Yep. I have felt that. I've been there. I've been in this girl's shoes before. But I'm sure there's also people out there that are thinking, well, what is this? Because I've never experienced anything like that. And why can't you just get over it? I love that when people say that. Just get over it. What do you say to that person to give them a little bit more gentleness and understanding of really how debilitating it can get?
Well, for somebody who hasn't experienced this, it is really hard to understand. It's really hard to walk in another person's shoes. So I'll just say, imagine one of the most scary experiences of your life. Imagine a worry. I mean, everybody has worry.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine just if that worry was amplified by 1 million,
mm-hmm.
how scary that can seem. So it seems like from the outside, just snap out of it, just stop worrying.
Mm-hmm.
But from the inside, this is something that's like a loop in our brain that we can get caught in, a fear cycle, and it's not something we can just stop.
Yeah. Well, so take us back to when you were a child and you had separation anxiety and, other manifestations of it. What did it look like? I mean, some children pull their hair out or pull out their eyebrows or things like that. What did it look like for you? Just so, parents that are listening can start to see, oh, hang on.
I had stomach aches all the time. So I manifested a lot of my worry in my stomach. I always had a bellyache, especially in the morning. It was hard for me to get up early. I was sick a lot. So I was just coming down with ear infections and tonsillitis and sinus infections. So I manifested it in a lot of sickness as well. And a lot of worry. My mom heard about a lot of different fears. I was afraid to do certain things, like just random things, like to go out to eat. I was afraid I'd eat too much and then get a bellyache. I was afraid the toilet would overflow if I flushed it, like something so little and silly. And this one is cute, I will admit that. But in kindergarten, I remember being afraid that I was pregnant because I liked a boy. Had no idea, had no idea. And so it's like so cute. But I remember being terrified. Like I remember touching my stomach and gosh, so it manifested in those different ways, mainly physically with the stomach aches and getting sick a lot.
Yeah. And so if there's a parent listening going, oh my goodness, I think I've seen this in my child, not just once, but maybe a few times, how can you center yourself? Either helping somebody else center or doing it yourself?
Well, one of the things that my mom, and this is for parents out there just to keep in mind, one of the gifts that my mother gave me at a very young age is that she taught me how to meditate. She taught me how to get still and to take some breaths and to ground myself. What she taught me back then is not necessarily what I use now, and I can speak to some of the techniques that I use now, but she taught me this visualization where I'd imagine myself walking downstairs, and every time I took a step down a stair, I'd feel calmer and more relaxed. And when I felt relaxed, she'd have me put my 3 fingers together, my thumb, my pointer finger, and my middle finger, as a reminder of physical touch, that I could bring my fingers together and actually just remind myself that I can bring my own mind to this place of calm. So that was very helpful for me as a child. To ground myself now, again, it depends where you fall on the continuum of anxiety. If you're on the low end, it might be that like you need to just go for a walk, change your environment, write a couple things down, vent to somebody. If you're on the high end, you might need more of a combination approach. So I'm an advocate for doing something like changing your environment. We can learn from animals. When animals, I have pet chickens. When they get freaked out, they have to like get the energy out of them. When they get that fight or flight response, they have to move and run around and just release that extra energy. Animals do that in the wild. After a zebra is being chased by a lion, they shake it off. So if there's something we can do to go for even just a light walk around the block, to do something physical, that can be one way to start to bring our arousal level down. We might also learn how to practice something like meditation, taking just a few deep breaths, even if it's just 3. 3 or 1 breath, that you just stay with that sensation of that breath as best you can to bring yourself into this experience, this sensation of breath that you're having. And then, of course, there's some spiritual things that relate to my book that I can talk about as well.
Well, that's such the truth. And wouldn't you agree? It's a vicious cycle. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling the anxiety raise, and you're looking at your to-do list and you're going, oh my God, how am I going to do all of these things? It feeds into itself where you become more anxious and you start, breathing heavy, and then your heartbeat goes up and you get more anxious, and you have to close the loop, right? And so I love the concept of, I think also sometimes I'll be the very first to admit it, as I'm on a journey to simplify as just as much as the listeners are, is that you go, well, okay, I need to go to the gym. I need to do this. I need to do that. All you're doing is adding more to your to-do list. Like, it really is as simple as stop, breathe, or stop, go have a walk, like change your environment, all of that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The changing of our environment, I think, is important, because if you're focused in on a fear, a worry, an obsession, if you're just focused on that, you're stuck in that loop that you just described. And so getting out and doing something, and I will share that doing something physical like exercise for me was actually really hard. I stopped exercising for a long time because, like you said, what it would do for me is that I'd start breathing fast, taking in oxygen. I'd maybe feel a little lightheaded, which would mimic the experience of anxiety, and therefore I'd have more anxiety. So, so exercise for a chunk of time was not something that I went to. I do now, but it doesn't have to be hard exercise. It can be a light walk around the block. So I do feel that change can really help us just get out of that closed loop.
Yeah. And even just recently this week, I, sat down and did 10 minutes of sun salutations with my son, at home. And you don't need anything. Like I was not in yoga clothes. I was still in my work clothes. There was no yoga mat. Like you just do the thing. Sometimes it is as simple as that, to help reset your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you talk to us more about tapping into your female intuition, what you call your inner therapist? Is that correct?
Yeah. In my book, I call this your inner therapist, and there's many different ways that we can think about it. So we have to find words that work for us. We're talking about the same thing. Your inner therapist is your inner guidance system. It's your higher mind, or think about it as your female intuition. This ability that we have to feel and to know something in our gut. We might all feel it and experience it in a different way, but this is our inner guidance system speaking to us. And the better we get at learning how to listen to this part, we find that this is something that we can really place our trust in. Our trust can build in that, so we no longer have to listen to the voice of fear, which is often what is speaking to us up in our heads. The voice of fear, like, I better not do that. I'm not good enough. I'm going to, I'm judging, whatever those, we know the voice of fear very, very well. Whatever we can do to lessen our faith in that voice and tune in and really begin to trust this other voice within us. I also call it the voice of love, voice of fear, voice of love. The more we can connect with that voice of love in that space, I'm a true believer, because this is my experience. As I come to identify with that more and more, anxiety has to fall away.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes your compass. I mean, I think once you get tapped into, and again, use whatever words feel best for you, your intuition, your, God, if that is what you believe in. I mean, I think it's when people use the words like universe and things like that, it's all one and the same. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Right. And, if God is love and this is truly divine love, this inner therapist, this intuition, it can be so powerful in your life. I mean, because I think what I do a lot with my clients is, just realize a lot of the answers already sit inside you. And I think that's also some place where simplicity can come from, because we're so desperate to find the answers out in the Google kind of world, right? Outside, everything's outside of us. But really, if you stop and pause and breathe and listen, a lot of the answers are already inside you.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is a very simple answer. That is a very simple way of putting it, that all that we need is within ourselves. Happiness comes from within. Our joy comes from within. Our peace comes from within. It does not come from anywhere outside of ourselves. Although we might think it does, it doesn't last when we get that thing, whatever that thing may be. So all of it comes from within.
Yeah. And I think that's where it is, you start to find true breakthroughs as well, is that you start relying less on the validation from others and the external, woohoo, look at you go, and more sitting in that inner peace. I think that's where the true magic really lives.
I agree.
So talking about a bit of magic, because really that is what it is, talk to me about A Course in Miracles, because this is the thing that changed your trajectory of your life, it sounds like. Tell us, first and foremost, what is A Course in Miracles and why did it really impact you as much as it has?
It's a book. It is a spiritual self-study text that is 3 parts. It has a textbook, a workbook, and a manual for teachers. The textbook is rather dense and theoretical. a friend who discovered the course and she's like, oh, I'll be fine reading it. I'm an English major, or I was an English major, came back and she was like, forget the English major. I have no idea what this is saying. So I always recommend that folks start with the workbook, which has 365 lessons, one for every day of the year, or the manual for teachers, which is much more digestible and much more easier to read because we are all teachers and learners. We're teaching all the time, whether or not we realize it. We are teaching love or we're teaching fear. So the course is a system to help us remember our true self, to help us remember the truth about ourselves, which is that we are one. We are totally, wholly innocent. We are made of love. We are eternal. And it's helping us to remember this, to remember it, not just to learn it, but the fact that, again, like you said before, the answer is already in ourselves. We can remember that this is who we are. It's layers of fear that have blocked us from remembering this.
Yeah.
So the course, the lessons help us remove those layers of fear to remember that love that's underneath.
And that's it, right? Like as child growing up, it's those conditioning. It's that, oh no, that's not sensible. Oh no, that's a horrible idea. Oh no, just sit back down, don't raise your hand. That you hear over time that builds your identity. How do you
Right.
break that down? Like what's a way, very simply, for you to start breaking down some of these old negative stories that are holding you back?
Willingness. Willingness, willingness, willingness. So we are so stuck in our ways of seeing. We have our beliefs, our ways of seeing things, the things that we think things need to be a certain way. Willingness to see differently is everything. Willingness to open our minds and to be taught rather than to think that we know. That openness creates some mental white space. It creates an openness in our hearts, an openness in our minds. And in that openness, when we're still, that memory of love can return. We start to have experiences that teach us that that's who we are. It's all about willingness and being open to seeing differently. That was huge for me because if I am completely honest, and I was honest with myself, the thought system that I was using was not working for me in any way, shape, or form. I was a mess. I had so much fear. There were definitely parts of I have had a very blessed life and have some very, very wonderful things. So it has been all that bad, but it was this anxiety layer made it really, really tough.
Well, and I think, when you're in the thick of it, right? Whether it's an anxiety attack or depression or just a bit feeling blue, what happens is in those moments, you're in the fog, right? Hope starts to go out the door. And it's hard to remember you're in the valley. You can't see the peak. You can't see the horizon up above, right? And I find for myself, and I'm curious if you have other little strategies like this that work for you, because we're not perfect, right? We all hit those dips. I try to leave little love notes for future Mary. So if Mary is in a dip or in a valley and she can't see through the fog, like, is there things that I can do? Whether it literally is a little note that says, you can do it, I believe in you, or a bracelet that I have on that says, you're effing brilliant. Or even just packing some almonds in my bag because I know I'll forget to eat a snack later down the line. Like, do you do things like that to leave little love notes for future Corinne?
I absolutely love what you just said. Number one. Number two, yes. What I do, because A Course in Miracles has been so helpful for me, I have little course quotes that are very meaningful to me all over my office wall. They're on my fridge. They're here and there just as reminders for myself.
Yeah.
Another thing actually that I've done recently, I was very fortunate. About a year ago, I was teaching at a retreat. And at the end of this retreat, a woman who came for that day did a spontaneous, I don't even know what to call it, psychic reading, angelic reading. I've never really been an angel person. I've never really been into angels, but she was like, oh my gosh, all these angels and saints are guiding you and with you. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was blown away. And I didn't take it as a special message for just myself, but a message for all of us that we're not alone. What I did was I printed out pictures of all these different angels and saints that she named, and I put them up on my bedroom wall. So when I wake up in the morning, I see them. And it's another way that I ground of just releasing, giving, you know what? If you're with me, take it. Take everything.
I love
Take
it.
it all. Take my to-do list. Help me there as well. And so it becomes it's been a very grounding thing for me and a very helpful thing and a daily reminder every time I'm in my bedroom, every time I wake up before I'm going to sleep, to relinquish all my concerns over to I call them my dream team.
I love it. It's so beautiful and it is so simple. And I think we as women, we have a natural tendency to tribes and to doing things as a village and being part of community. But we also have an equal natural tendency to be like, oh, this is just mine. No, I couldn't possibly give this to Corinne. I couldn't possibly tell my best girlfriend, I don't need help. I don't want to ask for help. So it just seems so like paradoxical of the same thing that we as women yearn to be in a tribe, but then all at the same time we go, oh, I don't want to bother them, or I don't want to ask for help. And so I love that even just if you're stuck in there and you're saying, yep, Mary, you're speaking my language here, it could be as simple as calling on your angels, your dream team. And, that's the first step for you to help let it go, because it isn't yours to bear. All of your to-dos are not meant for your shoulders. Right.
And that's such a practical tip, because I really want to highlight that all of your to-dos are not meant for your shoulders. It does seem like it's yours, but that's where you can turn to your inner guidance system, your dream team, however you want to conceptualize it. I've had so many experiences of feeling completely overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed, doing it all myself. And then remembering, being like, oh, help, turning to the universe and just saying, help, and having an internal shift where then I'm able to move forward with ease, and everything gets done in its time. And I did it with ease instead of with strain. What a better way.
Yes.
What a better way.
So I have a little sign next to my bedside that says, everything is perfect now. And to be perfectly honest, Corinne, I honestly don't remember where this sign came from. It just sort of magically appeared in my life one day. And during some darker days, I would look at the sign and go, no, it's not. Everything is not perfect now. But then, you always look back and you go, actually, it is. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be right here, right now. Not that it's perfect, as in like shiny and you've gotten all the things that you want. But I think there is some divine timing to how your life rolls out. Have you noticed, looking back at your life the last 20, 30 years, some divine timing that you couldn't explain?
Oh, all the time. That happens all the time. I'll give you a perfect example. My dream team that I just described, I had them taped to my wall, and I thought, I want to do something a little bit nicer, a little bit more permanent, and have something maybe on a canvas or in a frame. So my husband's an artist. He's like, why don't you Mod Podge some, like a newspaper background, and then you can Mod Podge the images of, your dream team on top of it. I said, that's fabulous. So I go downstairs, and he's like, why don't you use this old newspaper? Now, I'm an avid recycler. You can kind of see things behind me are very simple. I like getting rid of things. I love going to the recycling center and recycling paper. I'll recycle anything. It makes me really happy. I'm a recycling nerd. My husband was gifted a box of stained glass because he makes stained glass mosaics. The pieces of glass were wrapped in newspaper from 1974.
Wow.
Which is really cool in and of itself.
Wow.
So he's like, check out, maybe use the old newspaper. It happens that newspaper from December of 1974 was a travel section. One of the saints that this woman said were with me was Saint Christopher, who's the saint for travel. So I was like, this is awesome. So I'm picking all these images of these different places. And one of the places in this, it was a New York Times newspaper, one of the places that they covered was Japan. There's this gorgeous picture of this giant Buddha statue in this Japanese temple, in this Buddhist temple. So not only do I have my dream team, but I study Buddhist psychology and I'm very into mindfulness. Now Buddha is up there too, from a newspaper in 1974 that nobody got rid of, that now happens to be in my possession, that I didn't get a chance to recycle because my husband saved it.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's up on my wall as another one of these figures that is very meaningful to me that I can just turn to and release to and be with. So that to me, I don't know if that sounds like a big deal. To me, it is, because that's a synchronicity. That is divine timing that newspaper.
You can't explain, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that newspaper has hung around since 1974 for me today in 2018.
I love it. And I also think about times in my life where divine timing, I mean, there's no other way to explain it, where they're pivotal moments where, you know, either I got the courage up and raised my hand, or, you know, went over and introduced myself to somebody, or said yes or said no. I mean, there's things in those times where, and then everything changed. In the course of writing this book, From Anxiety to Love, like, was there a moment where in your journey that changed everything, that sparked you to write this book inside you?
So yes, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because this is a great story to emphasize divine timing. I had another very debilitating anxiety episode in 2009. I call it my adult age episode of anxiety. And I knew at that time, I had been working for about 10 years as a therapist in a college counseling center. And I knew at that time it was time for me to leave. I got this job through divine timing, through just trusting. It was like my dream job at the time, but it was almost like I outgrew it. It was almost time for me to just move on and do other things. And so I knew I had to leave the job, but every way that I crunched numbers, it seemed like my husband and I were not going to make it on one salary. We needed my full-time salary. But I decided nothing was more important at that point than my mental health. I took a leap of faith and I quit the job. And out of nowhere, opportunities for additional income started showing up. It was like that part in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where he has to step out onto just nothing and he finds out there's a path beneath him.
Yeah.
I knew at that moment I had a book in me, that I had to write now about what was helping me, because I was really getting deep with A Course in Miracles at this point, and my anxiety was falling away. I took my time writing the book. I didn't want any deadline anxiety, so it took me 6 years to write the book. The moment I finished, I thought I was going to self-publish. I got this nudge, this inner intuition, this voice of love nudging, saying, just try to get an agent. Just try to go the traditional publishing route. So I did. And I spent that summer writing the book proposal, pitched to the agent that I was interested in working with, and was picked up by him. We signed a contract within 48 hours.
Wow.
He immediately started pitching the book to publishers. Within 6 weeks, I had a book deal and offers from 3 different publishers. So timing wise, and before that, years before that, I had entered a book writing contest and totally lost. And it was the grand prize was actually a book deal with this same publisher. Timing was not right. Timing wasn't right at that time. I had to just trust and trust and trust that if I was meant to write this book, if it was meant to be traditionally published, it would. If it was meant to be published by myself, it would. I had to just trust and completely relinquish and let go. And the ease of which I got a book deal. And I mean, I've been told that by my published author friends that it's kind of an anomaly how quickly that part of it happened for me. But to me, it was all in timing. It was all just, it was the right time.
Well, and that's such a great story, because I mean that really does reflect back on when you try to push, go something. It's not always like, no matter how much force you do to push something, doesn't necessarily make it so. The timing has to be its own. But what I heard and what you said there, and I want to make sure I heard it correctly, is you committed to taking daily action. You wrote the book. It didn't matter that it took 6 years to write it, but you put one step in front of the other, one paragraph after another, and you made it happen, right? And that's the part where I think fear comes up for people, and definitely for myself. It's like, no, you're not an author. You can't write. And then you stop. You pump the brakes on it, and then you don't take daily action. And that's where we stumble, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that so beautifully, because it's so true. Those tiny little steps, and I do this myself, get tripped up in the big picture of this giant thing, this giant goal, these big steps that have to happen before. just start one thing at a time. Just start writing. Just open up your laptop, start writing, or doing whatever it is toward that thing that you feel moved to go towards. And in those small actions, we also practice that releasing, that giving over to our inner guidance system, our inner therapist, our intuition, just handing things over and releasing. And I very much believe that having that groundedness in willingness to release, that ability to just drop into the present and let go of the future into the hands of our inner guidance system, I very much believe that leaves this open field for the universe to just pave a path for you, to just allow things to flow.
It's a
instead of pushing,
playground.
like you said.
It's a playground that you're building, and you're allowing it to come to you. And it really is that simple. I mean, when it comes right down to it. Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that anytime fear does step in, especially I think people have a lot of fear circling around money, or lack of money. Oh my gosh, how am I going to get my next client? And then what happens is we're like a fist and we just clench tight, right? And when we clench tight, we forget to have fun and be playful and be creative in what it is that our spiritual gifts are, right? So can you talk to us practically on how we can not clinch and how we can, just quiet down fear a little bit more in those moments?
So would you like a specific example surrounding money or just in general?
Let's talk about money.
So now, I'm in a very fortunate position because I was able to witness someone very close to me go through bankruptcy and lose everything and still be taken care of. When they had nothing, there were so many synchronicities and so many things that were given to them with this divine, unexplainable timing that it taught me that there is nothing to fear, that you are going to be provided for, taken care of. The more we can ground into that energy, the more it shows up for us. Fear blocks it. Fear totally blocks it. But the more we can ground into it, the more we can trust it. So so I have a unique perspective on that because I was able to witness actually two different people close to me who went through similar things, who still had these moments of just being completely provided for. That gives me faith of just being able to not clench to money and to trust that what I need will be provided for. So that is really like the simple statement. And I know for some folks that might not feel graspable, what I need will be provided for, but it's been a motto that I've lived by. And it's, like I said, how I originally got my dream job. It's how I let go of my dream job. It's how I got the book deal. It works for me. So I share that as just one statement that perhaps can be helpful for folks to not clench.
And I think also we give so much power to this money itself, right? Personally, what I look at is money's a vehicle. It's a thing that gets you from point A to point B, and it's nothing more and nothing less. But I love the idea of if you just really, truly, at your heart center, realize and trust that you will be taken care of. And that doesn't mean that, it may manifest in cash. It may manifest as your next door neighbor brings over some yummy leftovers, you get invited to just sit around the coffee table with a bunch of girlfriends and a cup of tea, and, you feel a breath of expansion and feel connected.
One thing that I do want to say just about money is being open to where it comes from. Because initially when I left my job, I thought it was going to come through one particular avenue. And when I realized that I was limiting the universe by deciding how it had to show up, I let that go. And then that's when the opportunities started coming. So that was an important step for me, was to not decide how it needed to look and where it needed to come from.
Because you're not in control, and that's okay. That is like the lesson number one for type A control freaks like me. You are not in control, and that is okay. So can we talk a little bit about, it's 2018. We are in the day and age of social media and likes and follows and shares and tweets and all the stuff and noise in our modern culture. How can you, how can all of us really truly avoid the noise and avoid the overwhelm as female entrepreneurs?
There's nothing in our culture that will do this for us. There is no structure in our culture that encourages us to slow down and be. And so, number one, we have to want to release the noise. We have to want to reduce the noise in our lives. So we have to want it. And in then wanting it, we have to take a daily action to reduce that noise. So one of the very helpful tools in my experience has been mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness. You said this early on about not making our healthy behaviors one more thing we have to do. And I very much feel that way about mindfulness. Oh, I have to meditate. It's one more thing on my list. No, that's not the attitude that's going to help us. Mindfulness is about being fully present, doing what we're doing as we're doing it. So when you go wash your dishes, rather than washing the dishes and trying to think, okay, let me do this as fast as I can so I can get on to the next thing, wash the dish. Wash one dish at a time. Smell the soap. Feel the hot water. Feel the sponge. Hold the dish. Feel how it feels nice and smooth. Brushing your teeth. Rather than walking around multitasking while you're brushing your teeth, just brush your teeth. Feel the tooth bristles the tooth.
The bristles on the toothbrush. Yeah.
Thank you. The bristles on the toothbrush. Sense the toothpaste. Taste the toothpaste. Slow down and do one thing at a time. Our brains cannot multitask. Multitasking is a myth. We can switch from one task to another. That's what we call multitasking. But we literally can only do one thing at a time. So start to practice doing one thing at a time. And when you do one thing at a time, you're going to notice that the noise starts to decrease because you're not scattering yourself. We feel scattered because we're pulled in many directions, but it's also because we're switching our attention from one thing to another. So if we can make that choice to do one thing at a time, because we don't have, that dual processor like our computers, we literally can only do one thing at a time. That has been a big practice for me to reduce the noise.
I love it. Absolutely true. 100%. You can only do one thing and do it well and be present. And could I give a little bonus point to do it with gratitude and grace? And it's okay that it takes you a little bit longer. But, especially for those that are listening that have littles at home, they're watching. They're watching you. And you're helping them set those good, positive patterns and routines in their life as well.
It's so true. Our phones, our devices, we have to really, I know that there's apps now that you can monitor your screen time. Notice how much time we spend on our devices when we don't need to. One of the things with doing one thing at a time that I like to remind folks is that when you're in line at the grocery store, I feel like that's one of the most common places where it's like, oh, I have to wait. Let me hop on my phone and just start looking around. See if you could just be online. Just notice being in the aisle and just waiting, just being there, just being with your experience in that moment and not always turning to our device. It's this compulsive thing that I've noticed in myself that I've really had to monitor. And with that too, just with reducing noise, sleep is so important. And so making a concerted effort to stay off of our backlit devices an hour before bed, or at least getting one of those apps that take the blue out of the screen. Or I know there's glasses that you can wear to take the blue out because it does affect our brain's ability to produce melatonin and it affects our sleep, which we so badly need.
100%. So who is one of your earliest role models or mentors that helped you pull yourself out of anxiety and start to see there's a different way?
My mother. I'm so grateful that she was a spiritual parent who turned me on to this pathway of A Course in Miracles. And still to this day, we share it and talk about it a lot and go deep with it. She's been my biggest mentor, and a lot of her wisdom is infused throughout my book because she and my stepfather were so helpful to me in healing.
It's beautiful. And I think, again, your parents are such they're the people that help create your reality as a child, and so, I think that that's one of the biggest things that we all should take away is, people are watching. Even if you aren't a parent, your friends are watching, and not that you need to placate to them or place to an audience, but just realize that you as a person, you can be imperfect, but you can also ripple out and impact others with how you approach life.
One of the best things I believe that we can do as parents is to work on ourselves, to heal ourselves, to get into therapy ourselves. I know that can seem so hard and we have so much going on already, but the greatest gift I believe that you can give your child is that example of a healthy, whole individual. I really believe that.
Love it. So tell us, what are some good either blogs or other books that you've been reading lately that are inspiring you or even challenging you right now?
That's a great question. I've not done much additional reading with the book launch and with book writing in some time. But there have been a number. I'm just looking over at my bookshelf. One of my favorites is called The End of Death. Ooh. By Nook Sanchez, she gets hardcore into A Course in Miracles and really draws out the deeper teachings of it. She's been a wonderful teacher for me. That's The End of Death. The other, I'm looking at some of my chicken books I've been reading about because I have pet chickens.
But I love it.
Taking care of them. Yeah. The Chicken Chick is one of my favorite. For anybody who's watching who has pet chickens or is thinking about getting them, the Chicken Chick is a great resource online.
Chicken Chick. Do you name your chickens, by the way?
They are pets. They all have names.
Yes. Okay. Do you eat the eggs from your chickens, or
we do? We do.
Yeah. I think that's so funny. I love it. No, it's great because you can't just all be one note. It's nice to read books that are completely of all aspects of your life. That helps to give you a little bit more of a blended, reality. That's how you become better and better and better.
And I'm sorry. I was going to say I do a lot of reading too because I teach graduate classes in counseling, and so about school counseling and clinical mental health counseling. So
I love it. Yeah. So we ask these questions for all of our guests that are on the podcast. And I honestly feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but we've got to wrap up, sadly. But tell us one person in your current circle of community or people that you think is super smart that we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why? One person.
Ooh, that is a good one. I think that you should interview, she's an upcoming author. Her name is Dana Morocco. Mm-hmm. She's coming out with a book called The Top 10 Lies We Tell Ourselves. And she is so funny and is such a gentle teacher, and also of A Course in Miracles. And I'm really excited for her book to be coming out. So I think she'd be a wonderful fit for your show.
I love it. I love it. Well, gratitude and simplicity goes hand in hand in my book. So tell me, what are you truly grateful for right now?
I am so grateful that who we all are is love. I am so grateful that I found a pathway that helps me remember that. I am so grateful that I've had the chance to find my way out of anxiety to be able to help others. And I just really feel grateful for what we are. I know that might sound a little bit silly, but what we are is love. And that just makes me so happy. It brings tears to my eyes.
And I know we're not perfect people, but what is one superpower you possess, and how did you develop that skill or trait over time? What's something that you're known for?
I can answer this one of two ways. Anxiety is a superpower. I've heard, I don't know who said that first. I've heard that from somewhere. I, in my book, talk about how anxiety sufferers have a gift because we have a very easy time recognizing fear. So we notice the subtlest, tiniest fears. We can then bring them to our inner guidance system and ask for the miracle instead. This is sort of the process that I talk about in my book. So we are so attuned to fear that really that the ability to sense fear and feel that anxiety can become a superpower as we repurpose it. So that's one superpower that you might not expect. I developed that at a very early age, as we had discussed. the other superpower now, I'd say, is just my willingness. I am so willing to go as deep as I can in this lifetime with waking up, with remembering love. My willingness is just overflowing. There's nothing that I feel like I won't release or let go. I'm willing to let go at all of it, because I want to experience those miracles and have those shifts instead.
I love that. And I love that about your, from your book, of just the concept of willingness. It is literally that simple to make massive changes in your life, in your mental health. Everything is literally comes down to willingness, being willing to take the next step towards healing, right?
So true. So true.
So we talk a lot about do the thing around here, so daily action towards whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. What's one thing in your mind, one simple little thing our listeners could do today based on our conversation?
Pause. To slow down. To simplify. I love the name of your podcast, the Simplifiers podcast. It's all about, we are the ones that have to choose to simplify. We are the ones that have to make that choice to slow down. Nobody is going to do that for us. So pause, take a breath, and do one thing at a time.
And well, I will say, do the thing. You need to go out and get this book. It absolutely will change your life. From Anxiety to Love, a radical new approach for letting go of fear and finding lasting peace. Can they find this book online or whatever bookstores that they normally shop
It's
at?
all over. Yeah, it'll be in bookstores. It's all over, the online sellers. So anywhere that you choose to go.
And I'd say, sometimes these books, when it comes to clinical stuff, can be really heavy and hard and like lots of big terms. This is none of that. I mean, it really does come from your heart. And I can see that in the words that I've read so far. And it's very simple to get swept up into and read late at night instead of looking at your phone. Right? This is the answer. So, Corinne, where can we find you online? Where do you hang out the most?
I hang out the most lately on Instagram. I love doing little mini blogs with my pictures. Also on Facebook, of course, as well. And my website is FromAnxietyToLove.com, the name of my book.
Great. And we'll put all of those links down in the show notes for everybody. Thank you so much for being on today's podcast. And I want to end on one simple thing. If people that are listening to today's podcast and they go, holy cow, what she said has really spoken to my heart. I'm here. I'm in the fog, Corinne. I'm in the deep and I can't see the horizon. If you could whisper one thing in their ear right now, what would you say to them?
I would say the light in you is too bright to fail. That's what my stepdad said to me when I was knocked out, like off my feet, literally on his couch with anxiety. The light in you is too bright to fail. Beneath your fears is that awareness of the love that you are. And it just takes that willingness to be willing to go there.
Thank you so much for being on the Simplifiers podcast. Please do go to see her book and read it and enjoy it as much as I have. Thank you, Corinne Zupko, for being on today.
Thank you so much.